The Cannabis Conversation. A European perspective on the emerging legal cannabis industry.
Welcome to the Cannabis Conversation with Anush Desai, where we explore the new legal cannabis industry by speaking to the professionals that are helping to shape it. Hope you had a nice week. This week I joined Owen Long on his podcast called The Cannabis Review, which was a nice change. We chatted about all things cannabis in Ireland and the UK. I always find it really interesting to hear other people's perspectives and see how the world looks like from outside. And we discussed some of the differences on how things are progressing in the UK versus the EU and Ireland. So those are some good chats. Please check it out if you want to. I posted it on the Cannabis Conversation LinkedIn page. We'll also be doing a bit more of that this week again at a conference called CBD Live, which is organised by Cannabis magazine. I'll be having a fireside chat with a guy called Deepank Utkele from Vantage Hemp in Colorado. So yeah, please feel free to join us there as well. It's free to register. And again, check the LinkedIn page for more details. I've got some personal news, which I'm really pleased to share. I've just joined the team at Global Go as a consultant. Global Go are US based and provide a wide range of sophisticated consulting services to the global cannabis and hemp industry. I will continue to offer my services through Canvas, but I will now be part of Global Go's network of expert consultants providing expertise here from the UK. They boast a stellar group of industry experts across the world, including Steve D'Angelo, who's been a previous guest on the show. So I'm hugely proud and excited to join such a great team. If you are a cannabis business in need of help, particularly from an international perspective, please do get in touch. I'd really welcome a chat, see if I can help. Anyway, on with the show. Another very interesting show coming up today about another hot topic, nanotechnology. Enjoy. On today's show, I have Tomas Skrinskas, who is founder and CEO of Ascension Sciences. Ascension are a contract research organization and a therapeutic development lab specializing in the cannabis industry. Tomas, welcome. How are you today?
Oh, I'm very well. Super duper. Thanks for having us over.
No, real pleasure. Real pleasure. I think Marcus Rogan introduced us. So another great guest I've had on previously. So yeah, thanks for joining me. So look, we'll get on to talking a bit about Ascension, and we're going to talk a bit about nanotechnology as well as a sort of the specialist subjects. But before we do that, let's start with the traditional place of talking about you. Maybe you can fill us in a bit about your background, you know, how you came to get into this space and how you started Ascension.
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, just thanks for having us. And I have to certainly give Marcus a plug. You know, he's the real deal. And, you know, if I have a reference through or from him, you know, I just, you know, he uses the standing on the shoulders of giants. I think he uses that often. And I would say he's one of them that I'm, standing over with. But getting into myself, you know, I'll try to keep it brief. I am a biomedical engineer by training, and, you know, seems like a lifetime ago, and it was more in biomechanics and orthopedics. So, you know, nothing to do with drug delivery or cannabinoids, which is what we're currently doing. But my point is, you know, I was in the health industry. I was doing research, you know, got a bug for the scientific method, if you will. I then had a role as a field engineer for a surgical robotics company. So I was going to operating rooms and fixing this machine, and I had a toolkit with screwdrivers and Allen wrenches, and again, hitting home the point that I've always seen some opportunities in technologies that are changing the way we do things, and that opportunity led to business school, and business school led to a role I took on at a company called Precision Nanosystems. And they have a particular manufacturing approach for nanoparticles. And again, that's kind of where that story starts for drug delivery and nano approaches to drug delivery. And yeah, I really the ideas for Ascension Sciences spawned at that time, where I saw the opportunity to use precision nanosystems approaches to nanoparticles and use them on cannabinoids. And at Ascension, we just see cannabinoids as another insoluble drug or active pharmaceutical ingredient, API. Those are the semantics we use around here. And yeah, just mashing up the nano with cannabinoids and doing that type of research is what Ascension Sciences does. We look for pharmaceutical companies that have a delivery issue or problem with their cannabinoids, and we mix and match excipients or the recipes to put these cannabinoids into particles and try to solve their delivery problem.
Yeah. Wow, there's loads there, and we'll go on to talk about nano in a minute, but I always find this really interesting as a scientist. How did you find business school, and what drew you to that in the first place?
Yeah, good question. So when I was at this company for surgical robotics, I was in a field position. I was traveling between hospitals, working essentially from home, the company was based in Montreal, whereas I'm in Vancouver. That's 6-hour plane ride apart. And I was just not getting the sense of how all the dots for the business were connected. I was just isolated and not getting exposure to as much like why I was doing what I was doing. And so, the quickest way to learn, I find, is to go to school, just a 18-month program that gives you exposure to all the different aspects of business. But the business school, it gave me exposure to all different areas of the business. And I never really wanted to be a glorified mechanic, which is what, at the end, it was exciting. I was in an operating room. Things would go wrong and I'd have to save the day, and that was great. But there wasn't as much opportunity for growth or moving into another area of the company, things like that. And I wanted to, parlay my experience, mash it up with business. And I don't think that's uncommon, in the scientific areas. You spend time at the bench, you spend time at the computer, then eventually you want to make your ideas reality or connect all those dots, as I say. And it's totally fortuitous. The business school is based at the University of British Columbia, and their entrepreneurship and spin out companies are happening all the time. And that's what Precision Nanosystems was doing. I was the 10th employee at Precision Nanosystems. Now they're almost 200. And I really saw, the trajectory of a company growing and technology growing in a company. And that was my business school, that time at Precision Nano, where I just saw a company go from 10 people to 100 people in 3 years. And that was the education. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without, getting the in or the reference from having done the school.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And was there anything in particular that drew you to cannabinoids? And, were you worried about the stigma attached to cannabis at all? Or was that kind of a consideration?
Consideration is, yes. I mean, it's opportunistic as well. I mean, Canada opening up the regulations and recreational cannabis being available and, lowering the barrier to doing the research. We have our Health Canada research license, and it took, it's like 10 pages of application, and 6 months of waiting. But really, I didn't have to talk to a single person. I just emailed and waited, and it was fine. So all that to say, the opportunity was there. From the stigma standpoint, we're health and pharma focused. We're not making gummies and trying to, make people have a better day from a recreational standpoint. Because we do believe in the benefits of these compounds and just how much is unknown about them. But I don't stand on a soapbox and say that these are the best things since sliced bread. There's so many ways to feel better in a medicinal way.
Cool. Well, thanks for that. Maybe now you can tell us a bit about what Ascension does, what a CRO is, for example, and what you guys get up to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So CRO is short for a contract research organization. Sometimes CROs can also be called clinical research organizations. So we don't do clinical work. I just need to clarify that. But the contract research component is, the fact that people pay us to do research, to do tests. Stepping back, what we do kind of in two broad strokes is, on the one hand, we do our own R&D, our own development to create a toolkit or a toolbox of recipes or formulations of nanoparticles for cannabinoids. And we characterize them, or we figure out the specifications of all these particles. What size are they? How do they release the drug? For what purpose do they release the drug? For what concentrations, over what amount of time? And with this toolbox, some people might call it platform technologies, but we use it to attract pharma companies, small, medium-sized pharma companies that have a delivery issue or specification for their cannabinoids. So maybe they want to put it, have it absorbed under the tongue over 6 hours, dissolving in 10 minutes, applying the active ingredient for 6 hours, maybe for a sleep application. All these specs need to be appropriately addressed by the formulation. And so we'll come up with that piece of that formula on a napkin and the supporting data, so that they can take it, to the next level or scale it and bring it to commercialization. So we have that host of services or characterizations. We'll tell you how big the particle is. We'll again tell you the release profile, all these things. And at the end of the day, we want to see our formulations get into drug or health products. Those are the types, again, collaborative research, collaborative companies that want to help us out as well. It's a hand-in-hand relationship.
Yeah. That sounds really interesting in terms of people basically coming up with a wish list and asking you to figure out how to make it happen, right?
Correct. It can be a challenge because people are a little adverse to paying for research. Research is, almost by definition, a little risky. It has no guarantees of success. That's why we do our platforms, we do our toolkits to certainly demonstrate that there is a solution out there and we can help you find it. Oftentimes people want it already prepackaged, already, this is going to solve this is exactly the formulation that'll solve your problem. But we're just of that scientific mind that everything needs to be adjusted to your situation. So that's why, I read a number of these surfactant systems or different dehydrated delivery or powdered systems that suggest they can do it all. And they can do a lot, but I won't stand here and tell you that it'll solve your exact problem, because everybody's got a bit of a different situation. And that's, I think, the little niche that we're helping solve. What is your specific problem? And you'll have something that's just for you. That's our mini pitch.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. And are you allowed to talk about some of the projects that you're working on currently?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, in that way that we're creating a toolkit where we dabble in a lot of different types of nano systems, and we go, we rather go broad and shallow than down a rabbit hole for any particular system. And it's a bit of a strategy, and it has its place, but focus is sometimes hard to find. But all that to say, the ones we're working on, we have an emulsion system. So again, those are popular for food and beverage and kind of more the rec space. So, we covered that. We also have liposomal systems. So these systems are handy for combining cannabinoids with soluble drugs. You can do both in one particle. Another one is solid lipid particles. So those are lipid-based systems. They're a little more expensive to manufacture at scale, but it's not as ubiquitous. It has a specific niche area in drug delivery. Then the powdered systems is something we kicked off maybe 2 months ago. So these absorbent or mesoporous systems, you can literally just add the distillate that's in an oil carrier into the powders, and then your oil disappears into the powder. And that's something we've done. But if you can create a nanoparticle from that distillate or oil prior to putting it into the powder, you'll have even more advantages, relative to the delivery systemically and absorption into your bloodstream. So we're combining kind of, again, those powders with nano. And yeah, those are kind of the big classes. One we've dabbled in is polymer nanoparticles. Polymer nanoparticles are more like a ball of yarn. You can just entrap a drug in this ball of yarn, and that will then get absorbed or circulate or designed for a particular purpose for targeting. A company called Therapeutics is using polymer particles for a heart condition, for example. So yeah, we've kind of left that one a little bit due to certain challenges, but yeah, again, we've dabbled in a lot of areas.
Yeah, and that's quite a good segue into actually delving a bit deeper on nanotechnology. So you used quite a few slightly complicated terms there. So maybe, in my general 101 approach on this, if you take a step back. So, essentially, what is nanotechnology? And what I always like to try and do is, how is this used in the kind of non-cannabis world in general, and then delve into cannabis?
Yeah. So the book definition being, nanotechnology is the creation of useful functional materials, devices, systems through the control of matter on the nanometer length scale. So that, that applies to computers, to, paint coatings. There's a lot of nanotechnology in paint coatings, believe it or not. And in drug delivery, the nanotechnology really refers to packaging a drug in a carrier. So the nanoparticle, the analogy I've always used is the delivery truck, FedEx or UPS, whatever is the case on your side of the pond. These delivery vehicles that drive around, inside the delivery vehicle is your ingredient of interest. And the delivery vehicle gets to where it needs to go, when it needs to get there, in the appropriate manner, in the appropriate concentration, or, whatever it is you're delivering at the right volume. And you can design that vehicle however you want. It can go quickly, slowly, it can carry lots of drugs, little bit amount of drugs. And so that nanoparticle is designed appropriately or specifically for those types of things. I think that would be the best way I can summarize it without a whiteboard, if you will.
Yeah, over the medium of podcast. Yeah, for sure. No, thank you for that. And so you're basically kind of making it into much smaller and you're packaging it in something. And I suppose, what is exactly the application in cannabinoids? Because it's not water soluble. So I assume it's trying to deal with that issue. How and why is that important and relevant?
Yeah, and I think it's been covered in a few of the talks you've taken on from other groups, like water solubility or solubility in aqueous is important for absorption into the bloodstream. So the cannabinoids can only get up to a certain concentration in your blood if they're in a free form. To get it into a higher concentration, you need a nanocarrier system or a solubilizing system. So you can solubilize them with different methods. And again, the powder systems or functionalizing cannabinoids, that's one approach. And nanoparticles or nanocarriers is a different approach. That's only one aspect, the solubility component. The other one that we focus a little bit more on is tuning the release of the drugs and almost programming where and how the drugs go within your body. So again, cannabinoids in a free form, most of it, if you're ingesting it orally, most of it goes through your liver and just, gets excreted in your stool and urine. And that's, I think, up to 20% is what you'll actually get absorbed. So any of these solubilizations will increase that number. But the tuning component, again, is a slow release. I think a lot of people talk about quick onset. I want my gummy to work just as if I'm smoking or what have you. The slower release has so many different applications in chronic pain and mental health, inflammation, these types of situations where you don't want it all released in an hour and to be done in an hour. I don't want to pop a pill every hour. So particles can aid circulating the drugs for a much longer time. To some extent, they can also target different areas of your body. I mean, people talk about the blood-brain barrier. We're not going to win a Nobel Prize, I would say, with our particles and blood-brain barrier, solving that conundrum. I guess I'm making a huge assumption, you know what I'm talking about. But it's nice to say, like, getting, drugs across into your brain is a significant challenge, and particles can do that preferentially, but it's not black and white. But all that to say is particles can be adjusted and latch on to different receptors or be taken in by different systemic systems like lymphatic versus your drug or versus your blood. You can just tell it, quote unquote, where to go. And again, you need the particle to do that.
Right. So to summarize, I guess it kind of gives you more control and ability to manipulate how the active compounds are interacting with your system.
That's very much the case. Yeah, you should have just said that right at the beginning.
Oh, it's nice when I actually understand some science. That's good. Good. Well, I'm glad it was of use. So, look, when you're doing the kind of nanotechnology, because just when I was reading about it, and there are different sizes you can use, and how does the size that you kind of break it down to? How does that play into this?
Yeah, the size has a lot of different effects. So, different sizes will encapsulate or entrap more or less drugs. Like a bigger particle you can fit more drugs into a bigger particle. The other thing is the stability of the particle is affected by its size. So stability being like if particles are floating around over time, depending on the formulation, but over time they could have the tendency to coagulate or come together and form even bigger particles. And that's an unstable situation. And then when it comes to addressing, uptake or getting into your bloodstream or systemically, there's size has varying effects. So, if you want to generalize, a larger particle will not get absorbed as quickly as a small particle, generally speaking, or the release of the drug is also a function of the particle size. And, I think there's research on, the particles are so small, they're going to cause disturbances in your body, and there's issues with the excipients and things of that nature. And, I'm not refuting that research. There's just different ways or different reasons you would use a particle, and then they're not pieces of dirt floating around causing trouble. Particles are always made with biocompatible and anything that can be taken out of your system easily. And they've been around since the 60s. Like, we're not creating, the craziest technology, space age stuff. Like, these are all FDA approved and quite ubiquitous in food and beverage. You'd be surprised. So all that to say, the size and worries around excipients and nano needs to be just taken in context is what I would say. But yeah, I got around the question of size. Hopefully I addressed it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And actually I was going to ask you about the safety profile as well.
Yeah, it's not nothing. Some people worry about polymer particles. Polymers just are, for argument's sake, synthetic or, not something like naturally created by your body. But it's a cost benefit. Well, these polymeric particles, also the polymers are neutral. Again, they just pass through your body with little to no effect. If you're talking even in cationic or charged particles, which could be the type that people tend to say are more disruptive, it's in cancer therapies where there's tons of nanotechnology used for cancer drugs. It's the cost benefit is there. Like, and I'm not going to use a crazy cationic particle just for CBD. It's overkill, and I'm not too worried. And like a specific case we found for a macrophage inflammation model. So we're trying to see how CBD can reduce inflammation. And we put it on some cells, and macrophages, when excited, tend to cause inflammation. So if we can just reduce the excitement of these cells. So we put our particles on it. And what we found was we could use a lower dose of the drug with our nanoparticle than the free drug. So that was a nice finding. We can use less and have a better effect. But what we did find was if we increase the dose with our particle, we did increase inflammation. The cell didn't like more particles. So there's a sweet spot here. That's obvious of any drug. So you have to find that sweet spot. But at the end of the day, we can use less drug and safe excipients, and we're off to the races.
Yeah. And that's really interesting, that kind of sweet spot area. More is not always better. Mm-hmm. And finding that is quite crucial. So thank you. As we sort of come to the end of this, then what are the kind of key applications around this? I think, water solubility is probably the one that most talked about in this industry, and particularly in relation to beverages. But I think you mentioned cosmetics as well. What are the other sort of applications that this features in?
Yeah, the ones I'd mentioned kind of most interestingly is we're going the opposite direction of fast onset. We're going slow and low, again, for chronic and kind of more health focused situations. So we don't want people to smoke it with, it's mostly oral bioavailability or sublingual under the tongue. So those are the ones we're focusing on. The other aspect of all this is the manufacturing. So when it comes off of as distillate or isolate, it invariably needs another manufacturing step, regardless of what product you're making. So it needs to go into a carrier oil. What I'm saying is, we're trying to make manufacturing a lot easier. So that's where powdered systems are quite attractive. Like nanoemulsions and these particles, from a drug manufacturing standpoint, it's not a huge deal. It still takes expertise and specialized equipment. It's not too expensive, but you can solve all of that with a powdered system. So those are things we're always running up against when we talk to or speak to different groups. What in the end is this going to cost on a per unit basis? I guess that's where my business degree comes into handy. Having that big picture is important. So yeah, the powdered area that we were most recently worried about is addressing a lot of manufacturing worries. And yeah, prolonged release manufacturing. Those are the areas for us, right?
Yeah. No, I like, and that's interesting to bring that up because, yeah, it is all, the focus when I look at this is all about getting it into you as quick as possible at the kind of highest dosage. So interesting that you're looking at it from another angle. And finally, where are you seeing the innovation around this area? Where's the exciting bits for you?
I mean, I don't think I'm going to speak too differently from others. Like the minor cannabinoids are undiscovered territory. The CBN and the CBGs, and they're already finding their way into products, but the early research is not there, and nano is going to factor into those as much. The spray drying is being done as well. So this is a way of encapsulating or creating these nanoparticles and going straight to a powder. And it's technology that's been around, but applying it to this area is somewhat new. I think that's a very cool manufacturing approach. The powders as well. It's kind of an offshoot of the spray drying, and then the clinical evidence, is developing. But I think what nano is going to help do is take a lot of those anecdotal situations, into clinical relevance. So, I think sleep is one that's where people are. It helps, and that's not unusual or to say, but in a clinical study, that's not quite yet proven. So particles and all the technologies that I think are really going to elevate some of these, more anecdotal science to be quite statistically significant. Yeah. I think I'm rambling a bit there, but those
No.
ones.
That's great, man. That's great. More research, as we all talk about, is a great thing. Cool. Well, Thomas, thank you so much for sparing the time to chat today. It's been really useful and, yeah, very interesting area. And I hope everyone's got a better understanding of it now after our chat. So thank you.
Yeah, no, if I can just finish with our website, ascensionsciences.com, and our LinkedIn is quite active. So we're always sharing, or any of the pharma focused nanotech that we see is always on there, and putting out our own technical articles. So I have to take the time to say that. But no, I just really appreciate, being able to share some of these ideas. And it's an exciting time. We're pretty ramped up for this year. It's coming along. Not without its challenges, but
no.
we're happy.
Good to hear. Thank you, Thomas, and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Likewise.